Kia ora team, and welcome to the second instalment of Manawa BJJ's weekly summaries, where I'll take you through the last 7 days worth of focus and technique in the club. You're here with Pete Hodkinson, New Zealand's foremost broccoli enthusiast and lead coach. The last week has been all about single leg X, entries, off balances and footlock fundamentals, so we're going to get straight into that. If you want to help us out, you can support the channel by liking and subscribing on this video. And you can also find me on Instagram at GentleArtsNZ. You can find the club at Queenstown_Jiu-Jitsu. Let's get into it. So starting off the week, what we did was focus on a few simple ways of getting into our single leg X position. The first was simply our partner stands in front of us, we grab behind the legs and use that to pull our hips in, pulling their shins to our armpits, elevating our knees, one to the inside, foot to the outside, creating a closed circuit around the thigh. When we practice this, once we'd entered one side, we would ask our opponent to step back, and then we would re-enter on the second leg, so we could do this on repeat across the gym. The second entry that we looked at is a shin to shin, so I connect my shin to his shin, and then what I need to do is use my right hand on his opposite knee to transfer his weight to his other leg, making his left leg nice and light, so that I can kick it up with my left leg, creating a shelf down which his leg will slide into my armpit, into our single leg X position. So from another angle, here I'm pushing his weight into his other leg, off balancing him, so that I can kick up, create a little ledge down which his leg is going to slide into my armpit and lock in my single leg X position. The next entry we looked at was from mount. I get my hands on my opponent's hips and bridge up. This allows me the space to drop my hips quickly back down, bring one knee to the center, and then bring my outside leg around to his hip, locking in my single leg X and rotating him to the left. Again, I bump him up, get one knee to the center, and I'm able to turn into the position. Sometimes I hear you say, my opponent's going to be holding on really tight, it's going to be difficult to get that elevation. That's totally fine. He's trying to do jiu-jitsu to me while I'm trying to do my jiu-jitsu to him. That's the fun of the whole deal. So sometimes what I'll need to do is use the shaking or kipping motion where I kick my legs up to open up space to access the position. And we can use a similar motion from a butterfly guard where I connect my hands behind his back, I'm able to pull him in and begin to elevate him, where I unclasp my hands, post under his armpits, lifting up with my knees, and then I can get one knee in the center, one foot to the outside, and rotate to access my single leg X position. We're going to see this from a couple of different angles. Elevate, leg outside, single leg X. The next entry that we looked at was from standing. I step my foot in while I'm looking to pass the guard to his butt, get control of his left leg with my left hand, and then my right hand controls the top of his knee so it's hard for him to pull it away. I can in advance put my left foot inside his hip and then drop down into my single leg X. So we're going to see this from a couple of different angles. I step in, control the knee, get my straight ankle lock grip, and drop in to the guard. The next entry that we looked at is something for the pajama lovers among us. So we can see Paula has a lapel control, a De La Riva hook, and a control on the left pant leg. She's going to off-balance Brent by stepping into the inner thigh, which opens up space for her secondary foot to pull her butt through, and she can hip up and lock in the single leg X. Off-balance, straight up into the position. From there, we can start looking, as we can see here, to take our opponent down to the mat and start going on the offensive, which we're going to get some more detail on right now. As a general rule of thumb here, if I'm in a position to grab his secondary leg, then I always want to do that. It's going to make it really easy to punch into his stomach with my knee and tip him over backwards where he's unable to base. So we can see here with control of the second leg, he can't step back and rebalance as I take him down. What happens, however, if I reach for the leg and he steps away? Well, instead of punching my knee straight into his belly, we're going to go out over the outside edge of his thigh and tilt him into open space. Here we can see I lock in my single leg X, reach for the leg, he steps away, but as he steps around, I can also use the momentum of that step to tilt him over. Whee! Another option that we have in this situation, demonstrated here by Paula, is reaching over with our second hand and grabbing the outside edge of the calf and using our entire body to twist over that outside leg. This is usually enough power to get him tipped over into that side where we can lock in our straight ankle grip and start looking to finish. If, as sometimes will be the case, both of these are ineffective, when I reach for the leg and I just can't tip him over, well, what I'm going to do is plant my second foot on the ground and kick him towards me, which will enable me to reach out and grab the secondary leg and switch back to the initial takedown that I used from the single leg X position. Stomp on the floor, knee up into single leg X. Here we're going to see it again. Stomp, grab, tip. If he gets pushed so far forward that he has to base on his hands, it's totally fine. We're just going to follow him all the way over and we can still finish the position. So then we looked at some basic mechanisms of control and finishing mechanics. My left foot is pushing into his belly to stop him from coming forward and fighting my hands, and my right leg is applying some control to the secondary leg. I can then clamp down over my own heel with my knee to form a closed circuit around his thigh. What you're seeing here is as I'm ratcheting my way out and back in small semicircles, I'm moving my way back with my forearm, the blade of my forearm, into the fulcrum of his ankle, so I'm attacking the ankle joint and not his calf muscle. We can think about this in a similar way as you would look at holding a rope and clasping and unclasping as we tug away at it, so I eventually end up at the knot end that is the fulcrum of his ankle. So when we look at that again, what I'm doing is shifting my elbow out to open the circuit as I'm pushing, then closing it again as I move back towards the fulcrum of the ankle. At this point, I lean forward, getting the top of my delt to the mat, and then I can look back over my shoulder to apply the leverage to get the finish. One good way of practicing getting close to the fulcrum of the ankle is asking your partner to wiggle their toes. If they're still able to wiggle their toes, then I'm probably not far back enough. I really want them sucked up underneath my armpit so they're almost being crushed so that I can get maximal leverage on the fulcrum of the ankle. Then I can duck in and get my finish. So now I want to talk about something called force bleed. And when we look at our grips, what I'm trying to do is find an anchor so that as I move through the motion of the submission, I don't lose tension. You can see here, if I take my hand away, as I try to access the submission, my hand slides down. That's what this anchor of my second hand is meant to do in holding it in place as I go for the submission. But is it the only way? Not necessarily. Here we can see I switch to an inside lapel grip, which anchors my hand really solidly in place. I can also use an underhand post underneath the blade of my wrist, or I can use a full, almost rear naked choke grip to access the same leverage. All of these are good options for locking in a strong enough mechanic to get the finish. So following this, we looked at one of the fundamental counters to this position, which is our opponent pushes that secondary foot posted on the hip to the ground and hip jumps around the outside to try and relieve the pressure of the ankle lock. However, you can see here that I gain control of the secondary leg, slip my knee through the gap and my foot to the opposite hip, and then clamp my knee down for an opposite side single leg X. My opponent then looks to do exactly the same counter on the other side, and I can switch back to the original position. This was a really great way of building up familiarity with the position, being able to switch comfortably from one to the other, and success in this particular circumstance is all about trying to be faster in your attack than your opponent can be in their next counter. Another option that we looked at from here is called a false hook ashigarami. As my opponent hips out, I can create an opening to bring my left foot in behind the thigh and then bring my right foot over the top, stomping on his hip, locking down over the top of my shin with my toes, and I get massive leverage for a finish here. We're going to see this from a couple of different angles. He hips out. I use my right leg to create an opening for my false hook ashi, toes clamp down over the leg posted on the hip, and I can look to get my finish. Something we do need to be careful of here is that the risk exists for an esteemer lock. Because of the nature of the position of the foot on the hip, it's possible to lock in a rear naked choke grip and pull the ankle in towards the belly, creating quite a nasty rotational lock. In order to counteract this, we can step all the way through to the mat, still lock the toes over the shin, and then we still get quite a strong finish. So it comes down to the trade-off between the amount of leverage you get from stomping directly on the hip versus the risk of the esteemer lock. Another time we might see this is before we've actually swept our partner over, they can try and clear the foot from the hip immediately. We can see here that Brent takes this moment to switch his feet into the false hook ashi, push against the hip, and extend upwards, which exposes the heel in front of his chest, enables him to lock in an aoki finish, which is a rotational lock and a nasty finish on the knee. Going to see this from another angle. He's in our single leg X. Paula clears the foot. Brent switches to our false hook ashi and locks in an aoki lock. Now, we didn't get a whole lot of footage of the specifics of the aoki lock finish, but if that is something you're interested in, let us know, and I'm sure we can do some footage down the line. Now, something else that might happen when we get into this position is it's actually difficult to get a straight ankle lock finish or an aoki finish, and we can use the secondary leg to sweep out the opponent's second basing leg and start looking to get a belly down finish once we take our opponent to the ground. So we're going to see that from another angle. We've got a false hook ashi and our takedown and a belly down finish. Now, something that's going to happen regardless of whether the foot is posted on the hip or the ground is our opponent is going to try and grab that leg, pushing it over to one side, opening up space to relieve pressure on the submission. We've got one last ditch attempt here at crossing our leg over the front of the shin for a short ankle lock finish. So we can see here, Sean is hipping out. I get the stomp on the hip, but he immediately starts moving that foot, so I lock it down over the top of the shin and continue trying to execute the leverage on the ankle. This is a really nasty, really fast finish, so be careful with your training partners. So one last bit of Q&A that came up during the week repeatedly was what happens if our opponent leans forward, grabs hold of our gi, and really locks themselves in place, making it difficult for us to off-balance them. One option that we showed was controlling the same side lapel and punching the left foot up under the armpit and using these in tandem to rotate our opponent away. This creates an opening for a matrix hook behind the thigh, a triangle, foot inside the opposite thigh, and we can grab the belt to pull them in for a calf slicer finish. So once again, we rotate our partner away, switch the legs in triangle for a matrix hook, grab the belt, and pull them in. This works equally well if our partner tries to roll away. We can roll with them. And secondarily, we have openings to release the calf slice and move directly into our crab ride system. In no-gi, obviously we're wearing gis here, but in the no-gi there's the opportunity for an outside heel hook finish as well. So there you go, guys, another week's wrapped up at Manawa BJJ. Make sure you do like this video, subscribe to the channel, and help support the growth of the club. There's a lot of information in there today, but there's obviously a whole lot more that we haven't covered yet, and I'm looking forward to continuing to deep dive in the coming weeks. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you jump over and give us a follow on Instagram. That's at GentleArtsNZ and at Queenstown_Jiu-Jitsu. Eat your broccoli, train hard, poha, Chea.
Why, you guys all think I'm whipped?
No. That's on video now.
Please tag me, Pete.
I'm whipped.
Do you mind just eat shit for this? This is your nut. This is not the kind of shit we want here, bro. Did you see what I was doing?
No, just tighten and fucking.
Sorry, bro.
No, damn it.